welcome to the second part of 4.1 where we continue to simplify, add, and subtract rational functions. We're actually going to start right here with example number 8 where we're going to continue to talk about simplifying rational functions, specifically with glue terms. Now remember we talked about glue terms in the last video. A glue term is anything that has a plus or minus in it, because that plus or minus glues everything together so that I cannot get rid of them separately. I have to get rid of them together. So if we look at example number 8, it looks like I have 4 different glue terms going on here. And I can only get rid of them if they're identical. So whenever we have a glue term, the only thing we can do is check for GCF or factor it. So if I look through these, none of them have a GCF except for this first one. That has a GCF of x. So I'm going to start by taking an x out of both of those, and everything else is just going to stay the same. Now I need to start to see if I can cancel things. Now, a lot of students would look at this and say, these are pretty much identical, I can cancel them. But you can't. They're not exactly identical. One is positive 6x minus 5y. The other is positive 5y minus 6x. Do you see how the signs are wrong? The top one has a positive 6, the bottom has a negative 6. The top one has a negative 5, the bottom one has a positive 5. So that means they are not identical. I can't cancel them out. However, when they're that close, just off by signs, if just the signs are flipped, we do have a small trick that we can do. So what we're going to do is take out a GCF of a negative 1. And you could take this out of the top one or the bottom one. It doesn't really matter. But I'm going to take a negative 1 out. So then I have 6 divided by negative 1, which is negative 6x. Negative 5 divided by negative 1, which is a positive 5y. And then I once again keep everything else the same. Now let's compare them. Look at the signs on them. Top has a negative 6, bottom has a negative 6. Top has a positive 5, bottom has a positive 5. So these are actually identical now. Now if you say, well, Mrs. Johnson, they don't look identical. That could just be because they're flipped. So for example, you guys might remember from elementary school, you learned that 3 plus 4 is the same thing as 4 plus 3. We can switch those around and they're the same. Well, I could do the same thing here. I could switch these around to 5y minus 6x. Just flip them. Just keep the signs with them. And now if you look at it, they're identical. So because those two are identical now I can cross them out, which is what I was trying to do in the first place, trying to get those identical glue terms so they cancel out. So if you ever have a problem on your homework, your skill check, your test, whatever it is, where they're so close to canceling out, it's just that the signs are switched, take a negative 1 out and it will force the signs to change and then they'll match. So that's a little trick for you there. So now I'm left with a negative x and an x plus 2y and an x plus y on bottom. And that's it. There we go. Okay, now let's go back up here to example number 5. This is where we're going to start to get into factoring. So once again, both of these are glue terms. So the only thing I can do with glue terms is a GCF or factoring. So I'm going to do GCF on top. Now I know that this one is factoring because of that x squared. Anytime you have something squared, you need to check to see for factoring. So in this case, because that denominator has an x squared, we need to factor it. So I'm going to start with a GCF in the top, Looks like they have a 2 in common. So divide them both by 2. And the bottom one, I need to do our factoring steps. Now remember, the first step of factoring is always to check for a GCF. So I look through these 3 terms on the bottom. There's nothing they have in common, so there's no GCF. So now I can do my factoring. So factoring is, I need 2 numbers that will multiply to the last number, -8, and add to the middle number, -2. So 2 numbers multiply to -8, add to -2. Sounds like -4 and a +2. -4 times 2 is -8. -4 plus 2 is a -2. So that means for my factoring, I'm going to have a -4 and a +2. There we go, all factored. And now that we've done the GCF and factoring, you'll notice I have glue terms that are identical on top and bottom. So they cancel. And so I'm left with 2 over x plus 2. And quick reminder, can I cancel those 2? No, I can't, because that 2 on the denominator is glued to that x. So I cannot cancel them. That's a glue term. So that would be my final answer. Okay, example number 6 is very similar to what we just did, where the top has a squared in it. So you're going to factor the top, and then the bottom is a glue term but no squared, so you're going to do GCF. So I want you to try this one on your own. Pause the video, try and work through this one on your own, and then come back and check your answer. Welcome back. Let's see how you did. You should have gotten a -2 over 3. So if we factor the top, we need 2 numbers that multiply to 2 and add to -3. So that's -2 and -1. So I have a -2, a -1. And then the bottom has a GCF of 3. So I take the 3 out and I get a -1 left. And then I have a -1s on top and bottom that cancel. So that's what I'm left with. So that's it for this video. In the next video, we're going to talk about multiplying and dividing rational functions, which is actually extremely similar to what we just did. It's just a couple extra little steps.